Happy Devils Wednesday. This is State of the Fan Address presented by pucksandpitchforks.com. I'm your host, Sam Wu, here with the editor-in-chief at large, Nick Villano, streaming live on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, X Live, and Twitch on the Let's Go Devils Network. We're at the quarter mark, Nick. The New Jersey Devils, what have we learned so far at the quarter mark as they're, third place in the Metropolitan Division? Fourth place? Hovering around there?
It all depends if you look at points percentage, or if you look at points in general. They still have what? Like 3 more games than most of the teams in their division, despite having 4 days off. Because they're at 21. Weren't the Rangers at like 16?
Something.
Aren't they like 5 ahead of the Rangers?
They're just moseying on without any back-to-back games. Those New York Rangers.
I'm not even that's not even a fight worth fighting anymore. Because the year that the Devils had 16, I think that the Rangers had 7. Yeah. So it's just it's very clear. The schedule's not fair. They prioritize, and they do all this with AI now.
AI? Well, why would AI schedule December 23rd at 1 p.m. Eastern, Devils Rangers, on a Monday afternoon?
Because a computer, it doesn't have, you could teach it to have bias towards certain things, but they didn't. Very clearly, they didn't. You could just see, or they taught it you could. There's an infinite amount of bias that you put into it, but all that takes time to implement to the system. And clearly, they were trying to get something done, and that's just how it.
I'm pissed about it, Nick. I'll tell you, it's bothered me for the last few months, believe it or not. And I was hoping that maybe they'd come to their senses and say, hey, maybe a 7 p.m. start. And if the Devils, sorry to interrupt it, but if the Devils organization, you know what's going to happen? The Ranger fans are going to take over that building like no other, because Devils fans like me and a lot of you have to work that day. It's not like that's the last day before the holidays.
Yeah, it's a little too far from Christmas to be a 1:00 game.
Yeah. But the Devils...
And I know a lot of people have that week off.
Yeah.
But
I don't think the Devils really recognize Christmas, to be honest
School's
with
off that day?
Yes, they are. According to Shorts Guy. His district is. Same with Beer Baron. But
I
still...
think New Jersey kind of tries to get on the same page. Sorry, I keep jumping in.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm that's once the subject matter. I almost want to go on Twitter and just troll about how inconsiderate that is. No reason for it. I can understand Columbus Day, 1 p.m., but this is Happy Festivus Day. This is my favorite time of year to do a podcast, and it's 1 p.m., and I literally cannot get out of work that day just because the day before the Christmas holidays. Christmas Eve and Christmas.
So no podcast that day?
Or, I don't know, American whiskey is going to be overrun by Ranger fans? I'm still mad about it. I know it was a different subject matter, but since it's brought up about AI and the scheduler, AI hates the New Jersey Devils. I'll take that to the bank. AI hates the New Jersey Devils.
Can I tell you what I think happens?
What happens?
I think they put... So what they'll do first, they'll put the Winter Classic, the Stadium Series games, the European games, things like that. And then they'll set certain biases for the national games. So, the Rangers, the Penguins, the Blackhawks, the teams that are on national television all the time. And then they'll kind of let AI take care of the rest. So that's why you see a lot of these when the Devils are away from Wednesday night hockey, which they don't get on a lot, or they when they're just normal like day-to-day MSG games, they do a lot of back-to-backs. They have back-to-backs with travel in between, so and again, I don't know if this is exactly what the NHL does, but I know what the possibilities with AR is. Like, you could say, you can put absolutes in. Like, you could say, no, you can't do a back-to-back with more than 100 miles of travel, right? And that'll become a rule. Like, you know how how you can put rules in your email?
Yeah.
It's like, always send emails from John to this folder, right? Like, you can do stuff like that. It's basically like the same premise, but it's a more sophisticated way to do things,
Well,
and
I will counter that. I agree. I'm not countering your point, but I'm going to counter and say, and I'm making an example. About 6 months ago, I had to write a resume cover. I had AI write the resume cover. But instead of just sending that resume cover and going what AI says, I tweaked it a little bit so it represented me. They could have just said, oh, AI says December 23rd, Devils Raiders, 1 p.m. Hey, that's a little off. How about we just put 7 p.m. because we're going to make a lot more money 7 p.m. than 1 p.m.
So there used to be a guy who just did this.
Yeah.
I don't know what he does anymore. But the problem is that, I mean, you've worked for corporations before. When they take something off your plate, they don't just empty your plate. Like, you get more on your plate. Oh, now you have this new job, right? Yeah, so I assume that's what they did, or they fired the guy. I don't know. I truly don't know. I don't know what they did with the guy, but he has a new role, and like, oh well, on the side of your desk, can you just make sure this AI thing like took care of us? It's there's a lot of discussion about automation, and it's such a bigger topic than a hockey podcast. But there are so many flaws in automation and AI, and that's why like what they're really using it is for like low level stuff. Like basically what AI is right now is like upgraded algorithmic stuff. Like, they can say, you've ordered fries. Like, if an algorithm could be like, you ordered fries in the last 5 meals at McDonald's, I'm just pulling, like, whatever. I don't know. I don't think McDonald's is using it yet, but they could be like, cool, do you want fries with that? And like, they're like, oh, you had it last 5 times. Let me suggest fries. But what an AI can do can be like, you've ordered fries every time you've ordered between 4 and 5 p.m., but you always order a cheeseburger every time you order between 7 and 8 p.m. So it's a little bit more intelligent that it could tell time and things like that, and it can make preferences that way. And that's why the NHL schedule makers are starting to use these to make the schedule. And again, it does save a ton of time, but until you perfect the rules and the information that you're feeding it, you're going to get these flaws in the schedule, like 16 back-to-back games for one team and 7 for another. Unless that's what they want, Sam. Like, maybe they want, like, I don't understand. It would make more sense if, like, the Devils shared the arena with, like, the Nets or something, like they used to.
Yeah.
Because then you have, like, finite dates. Like, you even look at, like, the Prudential Center's schedule, because that's another thing that they had to implement into this AI formula is, like, oh, like, what is it? Is it San Antonio that has the rodeo? And their, like, arena shut down in the middle of a season? I think it's San Antonio, but there's like some city has like a rodeo and like shuts down the NBA. I think it's the NBA season for like 3 weeks. Like, they have to be on road games or like not play at all. So you can like implement those things. Like, there are certain things that take priority.
Yep.
But when you look at the Prudential Center schedule, there's not like a ton that's happening. They don't have like a ton of concerts. They don't have a ton of events and things like that. So like none of it really makes a ton of sense. We looked it up, right? There's no event that night, right?
Yeah, I mean, I looked it up maybe about 2 months ago. No event that night. By the way, Nick, I asked ChatGPT if Nick Villano from Pucks and Pitchforks is a legit writer. Responded back, Nick Villano is indeed a recognized writer in the realm of sports journalism, particularly known for his coverage of hockey and the New Jersey Devils. Pretty good so far, huh?
That's not bad.
He
That's
has
not bad.
contributed
Thanks,
to various,
ChatGPT.
but yeah, he's contributed to various platforms, including Pucks and Pitchforks, where he provides insights, analysis, and commentary on the team and the NHL. His work is appreciated by fans for its depth and understanding of the game. If you're looking for specific articles or topics he's covered, I can help with that too, says ChatGPT.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Robot Jesus.
Oh, you know what I'm going to ask? I'm going to ask is Sam Wu a troll on Twitter and see what it says.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk some hockey. We
Yeah, we
kind of
should.
got off the rails.
Oh
I
my
want to talk
gosh.
about like
Never mind. I'll tell you later what it says.
here's the thing that's kind of funny. Every time that we get to the quarter mark, I usually do one of my writers usually does grades. I think I'm gonna do it this time just because the writer usually does it. It has moved on to other things. But every year there's been at least one or two Fs, like straight up like failures. Do you have any that are like just straight up Fs?
Not really related to the team, but kind of related to the team. That Taylor ham I ate about a month ago that was disgusting and gave me food poisoning, and Beer Baron as well. Two different stands.
Okay, well,
Let's see. Any Fs here?
it's F for flatulence.
I mean, Nemitz.
It's hard. Like
and,
the one
and
that's like coming to
Casey.
mind.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh
What's coming to
yeah,
mind?
I mean, I was gonna say the only one that's coming to mind is Nemitz.
Yeah. I think the way they handle Nemitz, I'm not talking about them as players, and Casey, I think could have been a little bit better.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there was a lot that I didn't like. Having Casey start his career on his offhand I didn't love. He was great offensively, but he was pretty bad defensively. But again, I think it's because he's playing on the left side. Pairing him with Nemitz, so putting them, making Nemitz the veteran on that line. Yeah, I didn't love it. And then you have a guy in Nemitz who clearly hurt his shoulder in the offseason, and he came back. It was started training camp, so it's fine, but something's off with him.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to give him an F because I feel like there's more to the story. But I truly
Kevin Dineen?
Yeah, I mean, if you go to Utica, it's like all Fs. Everybody's failing. The fact that we're at the NHL quarter mark and the AHL team has 0 wins is preposterous. Like, truly preposterous. I don't know what I expected from the AHL. I have a lot of people who tell me, they were supposed to be bad. This is not bad. This is historically dreadful. I don't think anybody thought they were going to be historically dreadful. They got Nemitz. Well, I mean, now they have Nemitz, but they were always going to have Casey, Villano, and Nico Dawes in that back end. They added a bunch of veterans. They have Holland and Nolan Foote. They brought back Max Willman. They brought back Shane Bowers. They brought they have pieces. I thought Schmelzer was going to have a better season. I thought Schmelzer was going to be really good. I thought Xavier Perrant I was really high on Xavier Perrant, and truthfully, I have no idea what happened with him. I'm going to be honest, I don't know if he's been hurt or if he's just not playing well. Or if he got sent somewhere. But I had all these high hopes for all these players that were going to be on this team. People thought Chase Stillman was going to be really good this year and take a step up after he scored a decent amount of points last year. He was pretty good. Tyler Brennan had a pretty decent season. Not Tyler Brennan. Isaac Peltier had a pretty decent season. So yeah, there's a lot of failure down there. I don't know what happened. They brought in the new coach. They still didn't win this past weekend. I truly don't know what's next for that team.
Yeah, I think the fans in Utica want their old Vancouver affiliate back. At this point.
Yeah, it never got this bad, right?
I wouldn't think. I mean, you're an offer in the AHL. Like, come on now. You got to at least get a win.
You should be able to fall into a win. What do they have 2 overtime wins or 3, or 2 overtime losses or 3?
I don't keep track of them that well.
Yeah, I know they have multiple. Man, here's the thing. I think Utica is. I mean, it's a lost season already. It's November 20th, and there's nothing to play for in Utica. How do you rectify that? You know what I mean? Like, you got to kind of like make your own goals, because like playoffs are out of the question. You can't go. What are they? 0-18, something like that. I think they lost 18 in a row. Maybe it's less than that. Maybe it's 14, but it's bad.
Well,
I would look it up, but
it's bad for development too. I mean, you got to get them in a very positive and motivated mindset. Otherwise, you're going to waste a year of development for all these kids that are down there. They're all playing for jobs. They're all playing, for the dream of playing in the NHL. You're 0-18, 0-19. What are you teaching them? You better teach them win. Win at all costs. One game at a time.
I mean, we hear all the time. We hear all the time about having young players who are in losing cultures and having trouble like getting out of it. We heard it in like as young as like the OHL. Like these NHL teams push teams to trade their players to other OHL teams so that they can be part of a winning culture. What do you do when you're the reason for it? Like I think they should make a couple trades for like some AHL guys. Now the problem is that they're at some kind of veteran limit. I'm not gonna pretend to know the ins and outs of that, but they got to figure it out. Like this is, what are you gonna win? 5 games this year? You know what I mean? Like, are you gonna win any games this year?
And what do you get out of being the worst team in the AHL?
Nothing.
Yeah, it's not like you get a draft pick out of it.
You get a spot in the record book that you don't want. So I don't know what to do with the Utica. I do want to focus a little bit on the regular team. When I'm thinking about grades, the ones that are I'm having the hardest to wrap my head around. Like how do I grade Timo Meier? He's had some moments, but I feel like he's not done enough, right? He feels like a C, but that feels like I feel like giving out C's is low. You know what I mean? Like you feel like it almost feels like an F. You got a C. When all these other players got much better grades, but I mean, what do I do with Timo? What would you grade Timo Meier so far?
Based on, I'm just grading Timo Meier based on Timo Meier. I know that sounds stupid, but meaning Timo Meier's a slow starter. For Timo Meier, he's got a B. For being usually a slow starter to the season, I think he's doing okay points-wise.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of good things behind the plays that he's doing. He's definitely not dogging it. He does play hard.
Yeah,
What's that?
I'm agreeing with you.
Okay.
I don't think he's like.
I thought you said I don't think so. That's why I thought I heard.
No, I think I said no, which is probably confusing. But
yeah, so I give him a B just based on Timo Meier. That I think he's off to a better start than what he normally would be. He's not exceeding expectations, but I think he is meeting his obligations thus far, this point this season.
I think you got guys like Jesper Bratt who's still not getting the credit that he deserves. A lot of people are saying he's not having the best start, but I think I got to remember the pace. He might be on pace for the Devils' record for assists in a season. Which I bet you do. You know who owns the record for assists in a season? Thought you'd get this right away. So
Scott Stevens
it is
had
Scott
a
Stevens,
lot.
yeah.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, it's Stevens. I think it's 93, 94.
Yeah.
He had 60 something. The number again.
But they gave
Folks,
the Norris
so
to Brian Leach, though. Those wonderful voters.
Oh yeah. The fact that Stevens never won a Norris is insane. Because Stevens was Cale Makar at one point in his career. When he first came to the Devils, he was Cale Makar. And he switched up his game because Niedermeyer was possibly the best offensive defenseman of all time. And you saw that, my team doesn't need two of these. They don't need the two best or two of the top 5 offensive defensemen. So he switched up his game, which is probably the most insane thing I've ever seen. To take a guy who was one of the best two-way defensemen and an offensive dynamo to then become the best enforcer in the game. He's everything Chris Pronger wanted to be. He is just, and we've brought this up multiple times, that athletic hit piece that they wrote on Stevens when they were doing the 100 best players of all time, completely, under ranked him. And then spent the whole time talking about how he gave people concussions. When they didn't talk about that with, Pronger. They didn't talk about that with, any of the other, 50s and 60s and 70s defensemen. So it was just
Wait, are you talking about that nonsense reporter that also added in the, extracurricular stuff about Scott Stevens that had nothing to do with what he was trying to get at with the rankings?
I don't remember, truly, but it wasn't a guy that we usually talk to at the Athletic. It wasn't anybody or a guy or a girl. We've talked to plenty of athletic reporters who are fantastic, incredible. This one was a hit piece, and it was I don't know who this was for, unless it was for shock value, and then it worked. The people write your stuff, guy. Congrats, I guess. So, but just looking at what Scott Stevens did was just insane. One other guy that I don't know if I'm going to say I'm going to have trouble ranking him, but it feels unfair. It's Dougie Hamilton. Hamilton's just not having a good season. And I wonder if the defense wasn't playing so well, if we'd notice it as much, right? If he was closer to the other two lines, if it would stand out as much about just kind of how poor of a season he's having. He's not dreadful, right? He's not I'm just trying to think of PK Subban his first season here. PK Subban his first season here was so out of his gourd and just overwhelmed with the role that he was being asked to play. I don't think Hamilton is that. He's just not he's not contributing a lot of offense, and his defense is the same. So, and I do think that Dougie Hamilton overall is underrated defensively. He's not Tony DeAngelo, you know what I mean, where he's all offense, no defense. But when you're an average defenseman, and you're supposed to be one of the top offensive defensemen in the league, but you lose that, and you just become an above average offensive defenseman and then an average defensive defenseman, you're basically an average player. You're replacement level, and you can't spend $9 million on replacement level. or even beyond the contract. Like you can't give first line minutes to replacement level. And again, I think he's at least a little bit above that. But like if we're talking like WAR, if we're talking like wins above replacement, he's like one or two. And how do we grade that? A guy like because you have to, this isn't like math class where there's like one type of grade for everybody. Like you have to grade against expectations. And when I'm looking at grading Dougie Hamilton, I think he's like a C minus. And again, he's coming back from injury, but he was fully healthy in April.
I think that's a little low. C, I can see, not C minus.
I'll evaluate. This is why I'm talking this out to you. Just trying to see like where we're at.
I don't think he's below expectations. To me, a C is like you meet expectations. But C minus is like you're a little bit below expectation.
Yeah, maybe I'll grade him on the curve just because he's coming off that injury.
I would if I were you.
Okay.
I like that, the curve.
Yeah, I mean you got to get I'm gonna like for Jack Hughes. Like I think I got Jack Hughes at like an A minus because I'm gonna grade him on a curve because coming off the injury. He had a slower start. Right, he was probably about hitting expectations a little bit below, and then he's been wildly above them the past 2 weeks. So and again, we're talking about like such a small sample size. Like 20 games is small relative to, especially the first 20 games. Like the next 20 games are going to be so much more important from an analysis standpoint than the last 20 games. Depending on like injuries and everything, like how the lineup construction and everything, but is saying that we at least expect this top 9 to stay intact. I think the next 20 games are going to be very important for like an analysis standpoint. Another guy I literally don't like. I'm going to wing it on his grade is Tomas Tatar. It's almost like his grade should be incomplete. But we're not gonna like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like I'm not gonna wimp out. I'll give him a grade, but
it might be DND. Or sorry, DNF. Right. Did not finish. That could be his end grade by the end of the year. Tatar.
I mean, he's playing. He's getting minutes. He's getting more minutes than Dowling and McDermott. But again, like I'm probably just gonna give him like a C plus and be like, listen, I need better out of you. Like just be straightforward. We need better out of Tatar, but the situations that we have to also understand that he's playing with AHL level talent on a nightly basis. And like on top of it, Sam, this isn't like, if he was playing with Bowers and Nolan Foote, like I think you could argue it's still AHL level talent, but it's at least AHL level talent that like fits what he's trying to do. Dowling is just such a middle of the road, like he's just a no event player. And like that's pretty fine on your fourth line to have a no event player. Like it is what it is, especially like when you lost Lazar. McDermott is he's there for one reason. And you can't really do anything with that if you're Tatar, right? Like you're a guy who's like the intimidation factor, and that's just not Tatar's game. And he ends up just getting lost in the shuffle. And you almost feel bad for him because he didn't deserve the demotion. You just kind of got into the situation where you don't know what to do with Andre Palat. And Palat's been better since he's been with Hughes. But a lot of Hughes' heroics have come on the power play when he's away from Palat. I'm trying to rectify whether there's a reason for that. And then when you look at the underlying numbers with Palat and Hughes, they're not great. I just think Sheldon Keefe, when it comes to that situation, just how he wants to handle Tatar and Palat, it's just such a hard. It's a hard situation. But I do think Tatar. I think Tatar is going to have some moments this year. I think he'll move up at times. I think they're they do give him more time. They try to get him some time out there with Nico Hischier. It just doesn't always work out. They try to get him some power play time, and he looks fine. Like, he looks pretty good. So it's just so hard to evaluate him like that. Like, it's just not his fault. So you feel so bad, but at the same time, like, the Devils are playing well with the lineup like the way it is, and it's just the fourth line. And everybody and their mother has talked about the fourth line, including Pucks and Pitchforks. Pucks and Pitchforks was writing about what to do with that spot opened up by Lazar as soon as he got hurt. We looked at it, the situation, and said this is untenable. Now, I'm not trying to call out the other writers, but I've seen like 4 or 5 other writers write about it now, and we were writing about it a month ago. But I think the Devils are in a spot where I think for the most part, there's no giant holes in the roster except for like Dowling and McDermott. And McDermott especially. I think the Devils would survive if Bastian was still healthy. McDermott has a very specific role in this lineup, and it's not as an everyday player. So when you're stuck playing him every day, it's hurting the team.
Well, how about we stop with all this doom and gloom and let's talk about the A's, like Paul Cotter, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think you got to give Paul Cotter an A.
Yeah,
and Nason. Nason's an A plus.
Oh, yeah, he's an A plus. Yep.
Like, there's no other thing. And do I expect him to be this good this whole time? No. I kind of expect Cotter to be this good. Listen, you're very good at giving me credit. I've been on after the initial shock of that trade and kind of what the Devils got back for Schmid and Holtz, I did my research on Cotter. And this is a guy who played with Mark Stone and William Karlsson for most of his Vegas career. This is a guy who plays with stars. Like, this isn't a guy who, like, yes, at the end of the season he's playing in their third line and their fourth line. But this is a guy who's played up in the lineup. Like, he plays all around. He's a jack of all trades. And I hate that because I feel like then everybody's like, he's a master of none. Like, no, like, this is a guy who's above average wherever you put him. So, Paul Cotter absolutely, positively gets an A.
Yes.
But the rest of it, I think I'm going to write that right after this podcast. And somehow, Sam, we're already at 9/11. I think the Devils, I want to look at the schedule. I don't want to talk about the Tampa game. Tampa just seems to have the Devils number. It is what it is. Those 2 Florida wins were fantastic. And so, like, I have people telling me, like, oh, but they showed you who they really are against Tampa. Like, get out. Like, just the negativity and, like, looking for it is weird. It's odd.
No, who's telling you that? People on Twitter or people that you know?
People on Twitter.
Oh.
Nick, and not the people on Twitter that I know. Nick, it's.
I started to ignore people on Twitter.
I was going to ask, are we going on Blue Sky?
What the heck is that?
Oh, you don't know about Blue Sky?
There's a lot of social media networks I don't know about.
There is. Blue Sky is the one that used to have the guy who owned Twitter.
Jack Dorsey?
But the guy who owns Twitter didn't like that they moderated the hate speech. So everybody's going to Blue Sky so they could get away from the hate speech. But I see a lot of the Devils contingent is going to Blue Sky. And I was
Really?
interested to see that.
Is MySpace still around?
No. No. We always joke. We were talking about this because we had like a team meeting at my job, and I was making fun of the Gen Zers because I was like, y'all don't understand, like, and Sam, I know you're a little bit older than me, so maybe it's like a different context, but I feel like, first of all, I feel like generations, like, they're shorter and shorter just because of what defines a generation is like change in technology and change in like the radio is like the introduction of the radio and then it becoming a household item. It's like a whole generation, but that took like 15 years. And then the television and the introduction of the television and like that and like the refrigerator and like the microwave and things like these, like, and then obviously like, there's industrial revolution and there's a few wars and things like, again, there's like these pivot points. But when I think of like, I think the pivot point that we're talking about for our generation to the next generation goes from the start of the internet in general to the start of social media as like a phenomenon. And I wouldn't even consider that MySpace era the start of social media because there was so much more to it, right? There was coding, there was music, there was all these different things, and I think that a lot of the other, like Facebook tried to capture that in the early, but I don't remember MySpace ever being about competition and this body dysmorphia, these body shaming situations. Again, I 100% like understand that it probably happened, especially to like the women who were using MySpace, but it just seemed like the vibes were different. You're really only friends with your friends, right? So you weren't like I don't remember MySpace influencers. I remember Vine. I remember Vine had influencers, and like I remember there was like a Vine component to MySpace, so there was like something there.
Nick, I got a
Like
confession.
I think that's where the Paul brothers started.
Nick, I got a huge confession. I used AOL and AIM, and this is before what we know as social media, but that was the precursor.
Yeah.
I was such a troll on both AOL and AIM, AOL Instant Messenger, like no other.
Why?
People in college, at first I started using AOL Instant Messenger because my friends like, look, it's better than long distance calls, 10 cents a minute. We can just message each other on the computer.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how it all started. And then I started to build a friend list. People I went to college with who were all Flyers or Penguins fans. And I used to troll them with my away message.
Oh well, I mean that's
Yeah.
I feel like
And
mostly harmless.
yeah, well, and no, we don't I didn't do anything dangerous. But I used to go through AOL profiles to see if they were a Devils fan, Rangers fans, whatever, and I'd randomly I had a burner account. I think it was Peter Hose. I forgot what it was, but I would randomly just talk smack about their team out of nowhere and get into big arguments. And I remember I used to. This is before he passed away. I used to troll Dale Earnhardt fans. And be like this big like Jeff Gordon fan and just like completely troll them on AOL.
Well, yeah, that's
This is late '90s
a weird
stuff
one
I
now,
did in
but
college.
this is well. I don't know where else to go from there, so I think that's where we got to end.
Well, I think where we need to end before we go is what have we learned, and that's the question. The podcast. And I think for me, Nick, what I've learned is Sheldon Keefe is the real deal. I think that the Devils have been refocused. There's still a lot of work to be done. It's a work in progress. and they're in the right direction finally. When
I
Tom
mean, he's a
Fitzgerald,
good coach. You gotta
yeah,
and you're like a big Lindy Ruff defender, but he's a good coach,
but
100%.
but in fairness to Lindy, he didn't have the tools like Sheldon Keefe. Like Lindy never had two goalies, never.
I understand, but when I look at last year's defense and this year's defense, I don't think the talent level has dropped off that much, and it's just worlds different. And again, I think
the
Ryan
experience is much
McGill
better now than it was last season.
is why.
The experience is much better now than it was
Yeah.
last season on defense. Talent wise, I would agree with you, but it's two different. It's apples and oranges though, because I mean, Pesci and Dillon are veteran defensemen. Who did we have last year? Nemitz in his 12 games. I don't know.
Well, I'm trying to remember who was because Nemitz wasn't supposed to even play last season.
They had Marino. Siegenthaler was freaking awful.
He was terrible.
I put on hold at getting a Siegenthaler jersey because normally when I get jerseys like this beautiful, authentic Adidas Merino jersey, they normally get traded.
Yeah. But that's another thing we learned. We learned that these goalies are at least well above average. Top 10, I'm not sure. But they're well above average.
I give them both B pluses.
I mean, Allen definitely deserves. I probably give Allen an A. Allen's been really good. Outside the 8-goal disaster, where everything went wrong, Markstrom definitely deserves a B. A B plus, he might. He's had some really good saves,
but they're getting shutouts, Nick. Both goalies, which is great.
Yeah. Are you at all worried? Let me. One quick thing before we leave. Are you at all worried the Devils keep getting shut out?
Keep getting shut out. How many times have they been shut out? Twice this year, right?
It's at least 3.
I thought it was just twice.
No, it was at least 3. It was against the Sharks, against the Lightning, and there was one early in the season.
Well, let me just tell you
Hurricanes?
something. Sometimes you got to look at what the circumstances were. Down in Tampa, okay, the Devils were in the game for the most part. Just they had nothing exciting to cheer about. Watching Markstrom and Vasi play, Vasilevsky, he played out of his mind, Nick. He was they celebrated his 300th win, and he was just
It's Brodor's
lights out.
fault for sending him a video. Brodor should have said nothing.
Yeah, I know. I don't want to talk about it. But but Markstrom, that one save he had, it was right in front of Short Sky and I and my wife, Mrs. Wu. Like, he snagged that out of the air. Like, that was just freaking highway robbery. And you know what? You're going against the elite of the world, and you lose, really, the fourth goal shouldn't have really counted. It's garbage time. The Lightning and they just beaten the Winnipeg Jets. They were on that confidence streak. I think the Devils, you're going to lose some, but Markstrom was, I thought, I would give him an A- in that game because he was just stopping so many shots that were really
there
high
was a
danger.
couple big saves there.
Yeah.
And like you could, and here's the thing. I know you hate excuses, but the schedule has been brutal. And they're away from home. Like, again, I don't want to make like I definitely don't want to make like a list of excuses for it. But like, the play was so sluggish. Like, not even just compared to what they did against Florida, but just compared to what they've been doing all season. Like, they didn't have their legs. And Tampa's not a team you cannot have your legs against. Like, you have to go at them with all cylinders. Even though they're at, like, technically at the bottom of the standings, this is still a team that on your off night, they're going to pounce and just take you by the jugular. So I think, to answer my own question, I'm not worried because of what I saw them do against Florida. But now, and this is the result of losing the Sharks game is now, like, you can't afford to lose the next two games. I think they're playing Carolina and Washington the next two games, right? Yeah, I just want my reference sheet with
Carolina,
me.
Carolina tomorrow at the Rock, and the Washington Capitals on
and
Saturday.
it's a Washington team that won't have Ovechkin, so you get a reprieve there. But you need to win one of these next two games. You really want to win the Carolina game because you're going to have the 4 days off. You're going to have the rest. But also, you want to show that you're in that conversation, right? The Metro is very good this year. And Washington has proven to be in that team to beat category. Ovechkin looks like he drank from the fountain of youth. Take that for what it is. The goalie situation is so much better. They got Logan Thompson and the guy from last year. His name's escaping me, but people know what I'm talking. They have two really good goalies. Evans looks good. Tom Wilson looks really good. These additions they did. To be honest, I don't know what Pierre-Luc Dubois has done. I just haven't. I'm thinking about it. I'm like, I actually haven't paid attention to what he's done. But I know Ovechkin, I think he still leads the league in goals despite his injury.
Mm-hmm.
So you're looking at, there's a clear line of delineation right now where it's Carolina, it's the Rangers, it's Washington, it's the Devils. And then right at the top of that next year is the Islanders. I don't think the Islanders are bad. I just don't know what to say beyond that. Are they good? I don't know. Are they average? I don't know. Penguins are bad, though. Penguins are bad. Columbus, again, they're clearly riding like that. We've seen these magical seasons before where teams have won when tragedy is hit. It's almost like, call it the We Are Marshall factor, right? Where, like, these teams live, but the Flyers are terrible, like dreadful. So you got at least two gimmies, one a surprise gimme in the Penguins, and then you got the Flyers as a gimme. You got two, we'll call them average teams in Columbus and the Islanders, and you have the possibility where Columbus kind of falls back to where we expected them to, just based on talent level and youth and everything else going on there. Excuse me. I don't see the Devils ever falling out of that top four delineage, even when teams start to catch up with games. They seem like the worst. This is going to be the worst they're going to be all season. Was this first quarter mark, and they were pretty good, right? Over 600 points percentage. They're taking games that they shouldn't to overtime, so they can at least get a point. Sometimes they're even getting that second point. They're winning those hard games. They're beating the bad teams outside of San Jose, and like that was just such a weird game with Mackenzie Blackwood in that. There's so much to like about what I've seen from the Devils so far. I've learned a lot, and I'd say about 80% of what I've learned I like and appreciate, and the other 20%, a lot of it's like, the Hamilton situation. Like I'm learning that I've learned that he's not above this injury, which has taken out guys like Matt Dumba before. I've learned that Jonas Siegenthaler is back. I learned that Jonathan Kovacevic is an NHL player and like an everyday guy. There's more positive, much more positive than negative of what I've learned.
Good. That's what I like to hear, Nick. So what do you have to plug?
I'm gonna get that grades piece out tonight. That's out. I wrote for fansided.com top 20 MLB free agents and where they're gonna go. Sam, I'd recommend you read that.
Okay. Will do.
That's all I'll say. That'll be my tease. I'm trying to. Jersey Joe wrote something. Trey Matthew was on the trip with you guys to Florida. He had exclusives with Stephen Nason, Paul Cotter. He spoke to Sheldon Keefe about the schedule specifically. Wrote an article about that. So those two articles are up right now. One with the exclusive with Stephen Nason, and the conversation about the schedule. He talked to Jesper Bratt about it. He talked to Sheldon Keefe. He talked to a couple other guys in the locker room about it. Vinny Parisi has a piece. Jenny Streeter has a piece about the Jack Hughes piece has been doing well about how Jack Hughes needs to be more aggressive. And then I wrote, this story has been doing well. I wrote a story, just a career retrospective on Taylor Hall, calling it the rise and fall of Taylor Hall. Just seeing how far he's fallen. It's almost sad to see a guy who still owns the Devils' only MVP to where he is now. He's a healthy scratch for a terrible team. And, I go into what happened in Chicago in that one. I go into how much is his fault, how much is it's situational. He's just made, since he's left the Devils, Sam, he's made every wrong decision. And it's almost like it's not all his fault, right? Decisions aren't, but do you remember he signed with Buffalo after he left Arizona?
Yeah.
And then
kind of reminds me like Matt Harvey.
Yeah, but Matt Harvey, and maybe it's similar because of the injuries, right? Because that knee injury, Taylor Hall just keeps getting knee injuries. Matt Harvey, man, I was thinking about Matt Harvey the other day because I was when I was writing the free agents piece, I looked back and I was like, wait, how old is David Wright? I was curious. I was like, I know he retired when he wasn't 40 yet, right? He wasn't old for a baseball player, like Justin Verlander. But it was okay, he's at least close to his mid-30s, so it's not like he could still play today theoretically. But Matt Harvey, I think, is 36.
Wow.
And it feels like he retired 10 years ago.
Wow.
So I was just looking up those old Mets guys because that team, I know Mets fans hate this from Yankees fans because it's kind of come off as patronizing. But that Mets team that went to the World Series, I really like that team. I just did. There's a lot of really cool players on the team. So many likable guys. How do you not like David Wright? You know what I mean? How do you not like that version of Matt Harvey? How do you not like Thor? Thor was on that team, right?
Yep. Daniel Murphy.
Yeah, there's a lot of really likable guys.
Or Big Sexy. Bartolo Colon.
It was Colon on that team. Yeah, he was another guy that was really hard to hate. I really, and honestly, Sam, since then I don't hate the Mets. I speak about them as games the Yankees need to win. Right? When the Mets swept the Yankees this year, I was get Boone out of here, man. Get what are we doing with Cashman? These are the games you have to win. It's the Mets and Boston are the teams that you just can't lose to just because of bragging rights. But when it comes to the NL East, I almost always root for the Mets.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, let me tell you what I got to plug. JoinOurCrew.com. Yes, JoinOurCrew.com. Get the latest updates of where we'll be at. Very effective, Nick, when you're going down to Florida and you do an email blast, where you're going to be, who your guests are, exact location. Because the fans did show up, and there were a lot of Devils fans down there. So thank you very much. Met a lot of cool people. Devils, Carolina tomorrow at the Rock. Go to American Whiskey before and after the game. Till next time, let's go Devils.